Hi everyone! By the way, I am Hannah Velasco, the first presenter, and my partner will be Rose and Carabio. And our topic is all about Rizal Romantic Interlude in Japan 1888. One of the happiest interludes in the life of Rizal was his sojourn in the land of cherry blossom. On February 28, 1888, Rizal arrived at Yokohama and registered a grand hotel. On March 2 to 7, Rizal moved to Tokyo and stayed at Tokyo Hotel and appreciated the beauty of different places in Japan. The next day, he was visited at his hotel by Juan Perez Caballero and invited him to live in a Spanish legation. Rizal accepted his offer and became a good friends. The two reasons why Rizal accepted his offer it is because he could economize his living expenses by staying at the legation, and he had nothing to hide from prying eyes of the Spanish authorities. In a letter he wrote to Professor Blumentritt, he described a Spanish legation. Tokyo is more expensive than Paris. The walls are cyclopean manner. The streets are large and wide. During his first day in Tokyo, Rizal was embarrassed because he did not know the Japanese language. To avoid further embarrassment, Rizal studied the Japanese language and he also studied the Japanese genre, arts, music, and judo, Japanese art self-defense. Rizal and the Tokyo musicians. Rizal heard the Tokyo band playing a classical work of Strauss. Rizal mesmerized and admired the classical work of music, and the musicians were delighted to meet him. Rizal's impression of Japan. The thing which is favorably impressed by Rizal is the beauty of the country, which is unlikely in other countries or in Manila. The kindness, respect, politeness of people and the surroundings are much admired. Romance with O-Sei-San. Rizal fell in love with a Japanese girl whose love lines infused with joy and romance in his soaring heart. Rizal saw a pretty girl in hotel and asked the gardener and told him her name was Siko Usui.
Rizal's impression of Japan. The things which favorably impressed Rizal when he was in Japan back there were first, the beauty of the country itself, the flowers, the trees, mountains, streams, and scenic panoramas that you can see in the country of Japan. The second one is the cleanliness of the country, the politeness of the people, and the industry of the Japanese people. The third one is the dress, how formal they are, and the simple charm of the Japanese women. The fourth one is there were very few thieves in Japan, so that the houses remain open day and night. And in hotel room, one can safely leave money on the table. But here in our country, if you remain or maintain your door open or your house open day and night, you are like invited those thieves to go inside your house and get everything that you have in your house. And number 5, beggars were rarely seen in the city's streets, unlike here in Manila and other cities that you can see some poor people under the bridge, beside the trails, and so on and so forth. So let's talk about the romance of Rizal with O-Sei-San. One spring afternoon, a few days after he had moved to the Spanish legation in the Azabado district of Tokyo, Rizal saw a pretty Japanese girl walking past the legation gate. Being a man, syempre, with an eye for feminine beauty, he was attracted to her regal vileness and charm. He craved to meet her, but how? A Japanese gardener told him that the girl's name was Seko Usui. The following afternoon, Rizal and the Japanese gardener waited at the legation gate and watched for the girl. As she approached, he took off his hat and politely introduced himself to the Japanese girl. He was wearing a costume in Germany, and at that time, Rizal's Japanese was still very poor, so that the gardener came to his aid and explained to the girl that the young man was a physician from Philippines or from Manila who was a guest of the Spanish legation. Seko-san was mildly amused at the gala gentleman from the Philippines who spoke in halting Japanese. So she replied in English, for she knew that language and also French. The two then conversed in both English and French. The language barrier was thus eliminated. Since that first meeting, Rizal and O-Sei-San, as Rizal called her, met almost daily. Together, they visited the interesting spot of the city of Japan. First, the Imperial Art Gallery, the Imperial Library, the universities, the Shokubutsu-en o Botanical Garden, and the city parks, particularly in Hibiya Park, and the picturesque shrines. Every man has an ideal qualities of a woman, and so is Rizal. Rizal saw in lovely O-Sei-San the qualities of his ideal womanhood: beauty, charm, modesty, and intelligence. No wonder he fell deeply in love with her. O-Sei-San reciprocated his affection, so O-Sei-San also have a feelings for Rizal. For it was the first time her heart palpitated with joy to see a man of gallantry, dignity, courtesy, and versatile talents. O-Sei-San helped Rizal in many ways. More than a sweetheart, she was his guide, interpreter, and a tutor. She guided him in observing the shrines and villages around the Tokyo. She improved his knowledge of Nippongo or Japanese language and told him some Japanese history. The beauty of O-Sei-San's almost tempted Rizal to settle down in Japan. At the same time, he was offered a good job at the Spanish legation. If he were a man of lesser heroic mold, of lesser willpower, he would have lived permanently in Japan, and happily at that with O-Sei-San. But then the world in general and the Philippines particularly would have lost a Rizal. Rizal realized that his countries need him, so Rizal's great love for O-Sei-San is attested by the hero's diary. On the eve of his departure, he wrote in his diary. This is what he wrote in his diary. Japan has enchanted me. The beautiful scenery, the flowers, the trees, and the inhabitants, so peaceful and courteous and so pleasant. O-Sei-San, sayonara, sayonara. I have spent a happy golden month. I don't know if I can have another one like that in all my life. Love, money, friendship, appreciation, honors. They have not been wanting to think that I'm living this life for the uncertain and the unknown. There I was offered an easy way to live beloved and esteemed. To you, I dedicate the final chapter of these memories of my youth. No woman like you has ever loved me. No woman like you has ever sacrificed for me. Like the flower of the koji that falls from the stem, and who, without falling leaves or without withering, with poetry still despite its fall. That's you. Neither have you lost your purity, nor have the delicate petals of your innocence faded. Sayonara, sayonara. You shall never return to know that I have once more thought of you, and that your image lives in my memory, and undoubtedly, I am always thinking of you. Your name lives in the sight of my lips. Your image accompanies and animates all my thoughts. When shall I return to pass another divine afternoon like that in the temple of Meguro? When shall the sweet hour I spent with you return? When shall I find them sweeter, more tranquil, and more pleasing? You are the color of the camellia, its freshness, its elegance. Ah, last descendants of a noble family, faithful to an unfortunate. Vengeance, you are lovely light. Everything has handed. Sayonara, sayonara. With this tenderly tragic entry in his own diary, Rizal bade farewell to lovely O-Sei-San, so that we can see that his love for O-Sei-San is very genuine, and that you can see that O-Sei-San truly loved him, gave him everything, and sacrificed everything for him. April 13, 1888, when Rizal boarded the Belgic, an English steamer at Yokohama, bound for the United States. He left Japan with a heavy heart because he lives O-Sei-San, for he knew that he would never see the beauty of the land of the cherry blossom and his beloved O-Sei-San. Truly, his sojourn in Japan for 45 days was one of the happiest interlude in his life. So as you can see, only almost 2 months he was staying in Japan, but he fell in love to O-Sei-San. So that we conclude that O-Sei-San is truly a truly beautiful and like a cherry blossom as he compare O-Sei-San is. So after Rizal's departure, O-Sei-San, as everything on earth has to end, the beautiful romance between Rizal and O-Sei-San inevitably came to a dolorous ending. Sacrificing his personal happiness, Rizal had to carry on his libertarian mission in Europe. Accordingly, he resumed his voyage, leaving behind the lovely O-Sei-San, whom he passionately loved. Rizal also sacrificed his happiness and his life and his love for the mission that he need to succeed. Broken-hearted by the departure of Rizal, the first man to capture her heart, O-Sei-San mourned for a long time the loss of her lover. Eventually, she became resigned to her fate, cherishing into death the nostalgic memories of her romance with Rizal. About 1897, a year after Rizal's execution, she married Mr. Alfred Carlton, British teacher of chemistry of the Pierce School in Tokyo. So as we can see, O-Sei-San got married to a chemistry teacher who lives in Tokyo. Their wedlock was blessed by one only child, a daughter named Yuriko. After many years of teaching, Carlton was awarded by the Japanese government with an Imperial Decoration, Order of Merit, 5th class. He died on November 2, 1915, survived by O-Sei-San, whose real name was Seku Usui. Remember that O-Sei-San is Sikoi Osoi, and their daughter Yuriko. This daughter later married Yoshihiro Takiguchi, son of the Japanese senator. Mrs. Carlton, or O-Sei-San, as a widow, lived in a comfortable home in Shinjuku District, Japan, or Tokyo. She survived World War II, but her home was destroyed in 1944 by the U.S. bombing of Tokyo. She died on May 1, 1947 at the age of 80. So she lived long kaysa kay Rizal. She was buried in her husband's tomb at Zoshigawa Cemetery. A Japanese inscription on their tomb read as Alfred Cartron, 5th Order and Order of Merit and Wife Seko. Traveling across the Pacific despite his sorrowing heart, Rizal enjoyed the pleasant trans-Pacific voyage to the United States. On board the ship, he met a semi-Filipino family, Mr. Ronaldo Turner, his wife Emma Jackson, daughter of an Englishman, their children, and their maid-servant from Pangasinan. One day, one of the children, a bright young boy, asked Rizal, "Do you know, sir, a famous man in Manila named Richal? He wrote a novel, Noli Me Tangere." "Yes, iho, I am Richal," replied Rizal. In great joy, the boy rushed to his mother, informing her that the famous man is their fellow passenger. She felicitated Rizal, feeling proud that they were traveling with a celebrity. While traveling, another passenger which Rizal best friended on board the Belgic was Tetcho Suehiro, a fighting Japanese journalist, novelist, and champion of human rights who was forced by the Japanese government to leave the country, just as Rizal was compelled to leave the Philippines by the Spanish authorities. So Rizal and Tetcho were kindred spirits. Both were valiant patriots, implacable foes of injustice and tyranny. Both were men of peace, using their trenchant pens as formidable weapons to fight for their people, welfare, and happiness. Rizal told Tetcho the story of his life's mission to emancipate his oppressed people from Spanish tyranny and the persecutions which he and his family suffered from the vindictive Spanish officials and bad friars, causing him to flee to the foreign countries where he could freely carry on his libertarian activities. During their intimate acquaintanceship of almost 8 months, April 13 to December 1, 1888, Tetcho came to admire Rizal, whose patriotism and magnificent talents greatly fascinated him and influenced him to fortify his own crusade for human rights in his own country. On December 1, 1888, Rizal and Tetcho had their last warm and handshake and bid each other goodbye. As Rizal and Tetcho became friends, in 1889, shortly after his return to Japan, Tetcho published his travel diary, which contained his impression of Rizal as follows. Quoted, "Mr. Rizal was a citizen of Manila in the Philippines. Aged about 27 to 29, young as he was proficient in 7 languages. It was in SS Belgique that we first met. I came to England by way of America with him. Ever since I had been intercoursing him. Rizal was an open-hearted man. He was not hair-splitting. He was an accomplished, good at picture, skillful and exquisite was work, especially. Quote, so after the publication of his travel diary, Tetcho resigned his position as editor of Tokyo newspaper Choya and entered politics. In 1890, he was elected as member of the lower house of the First Imperial Diet, or Japanese Parliament, where he carried on his fight for human rights. The following year, 1891, he published political novel titled Nankai no Daiharan, or Storm over the South Sea, which resembles Rizal's Noli Me Tangere in plot. 3 years later, 1894, he published another novel entitled O Nobara, or The Big Ocean, which was similar to El Filibusterismo. Tetcho died at heart attack in Tokyo in February 1896, 10 months before Rizal's execution. He was then 49 years old. So as you can see, they are so young when they died, but in a different place and years. So that will be all for the Rizal Romantic Interlude in Japan. Thank you.